The quiet hum of the old refrigerator, a comforting familiar sound in my small apartment, is my world now. I sit by the window, watching the rain streaking down the glass. Each drop feels like a memory, a story I carry within me, not for pity, not for bitterness, but because silence, sometimes, weighs more heavily than the cruelest betrayal. I will tell you how the person who should have been a daughter to me became the architect of my ruin, snatching away the only thing that gave my life meaning, the love of my son. Before the storm arrived, my life was simple, yet immensely happy. My beloved husband, Ricardo, had passed away years ago, leaving a void that was filled only by our son, Carlos. He was my son, my driving force. Every sacrifice I made to raise him alone felt utterly worth it when I saw him become a good man, a talented architect, and most importantly, a loving son. Our house, nestled on a quiet street with a porch swing and a blooming rose bush, was not a mansion, but it overflowed with laughter and the aroma of his favorite Sunday roast. Sundays were sacred, a ritual we never missed. We would spend them together, watching old black and white movies, the kind Ricardo loved, or simply sharing stories in the garden. We were a team, a bond I believed was unbreakable. How incredibly naive I was. Everything began to shift the day Carlos walked through the front door, a smile so radiant it seemed to illuminate every corner of our home. He took my hands in his eyes sparkling with an unfamiliar excitement. "Mom," he said, his voice brimming with joy, "I have someone I want you to meet. Her name is Sophia. I believe she is the woman of my life." My heart swelled with a happiness that mirrored his own. My son's joy was my joy. For weeks, he talked incessantly about her, recounting tales of her quick wit, her captivating beauty, how she made him feel like the luckiest man on earth. I listened, my anticipation growing with each story. I was eager to embrace this new chapter, eager to welcome the woman who had captivated my son. Then, the day of her first visit arrived. Sophia stepped into our home, and I must admit, she was dazzling. Her smile was enchanting, a soft curve of her lips that promised warmth, and her voice possessed a sweet cadence that seemed to melt away any lingering worries I might have held. She carried a generous bouquet of my favorite flowers, fragrant peonies, telling me Carlos had mentioned my love for them. In that instant, any apprehension I harbored dissolved. I opened the doors of my home to her, and unknowingly, also the most guarded chambers of my heart. She seemed perfect, almost impossibly so. She listened to my stories with an attention that felt boundless, her gaze fixed on mine as if my every word held profound wisdom. She praised my cooking with an enthusiasm that felt genuine, and she called me suegrita querida, a term of endearment that warmed me deeply. I felt like the luckiest woman alive. My son had found a good woman, and I believed I was finally gaining the daughter I had never had. But even amidst that swirling tide of happiness, there were whispers, faint echoes of dissonance. A fleeting glint in her eyes, almost imperceptible, when she thought no one was watching. A question, too precise, too carefully phrased, about my deceased husband's life insurance policy. A subtle, almost imperceptible way of drawing Carlos's attention away from me during conversations. A shift in his focus that felt like a quiet tug of war. These were tiny details, small infractions against my intuition, almost insignificant in the grand scheme of her charm. My maternal instinct, a deep, ancient warning system, noted them, but my mind, so desperate to see my son happy and settled, chose to override its warnings, to dismiss them as the silly anxieties of an overprotective mother. Little did I know that this woman was not an angel sent to bless my family. She was a sweet, patient poison that, in my blindness of maternal love, I had invited into the very core of my home, allowing it to begin its slow, insidious work of destruction from within. The initial weeks unfolded in a kind of artificial harmony. Sophia had, with remarkable speed, woven herself into the fabric of our lives. She was present at every meal, a part of every conversation. Her laughter, a frequent accompaniment to our days. At first, I told myself this was normal. My son was building a new life, and his partner would naturally become a central figure. But soon, her constant presence began to feel like a shadow, one that gradually extinguished the warm, incandescent light that had always existed between Carlos and me. Our Sundays, once sacred rituals of shared time and comfort, began to change, subtly at first, then with increasing frequency. "Mom, we won't be able to make it over today," Carlos would say over the phone, his voice laced with an unfamiliar haste. Sophia woke up with a terrible headache. "I think it is better if we just stay home and she rests." The next time, the excuse was a surprise party for Sophia's friends, a sudden, non-negotiable engagement. Then, a shopping trip she described as absolutely essential for their future home. Each excuse, individually, was plausible, perfectly understandable, but the cumulative effect left a deepening void in my heart, a cold, empty space where our Sunday warmth used to be. When I gently mentioned how much I missed our cherished Sundays, Carlos's response was immediate and defensive. "Mom, please do not say that. You know how sensitive Sophia is. She will think you do not like her spending time with me." That was the first time I felt a truly icy pang. He did not say, "Mom, I will try to make time." Instead, his primary concern was how Sophia would feel, her perception, her comfort, eclipsing my longing. Sophia's comments, initially so saccharine, now carried a hidden venom, subtly delivered with a smile. One evening, as I served the rich, aromatic beef stew that Carlos had adored since childhood, she beamed at me across the table. "Oh, Sugrita, this is absolutely delicious. It looks incredible," she purred, her eyes bright. "Only, it is a little heavy for Carlos's new diet. His doctor is concerned about his cholesterol. You know, I am just trying to help him eat healthier, for his well-being." She delivered this with the most genuine tone of concern, her brow furrowed slightly, but the message was clear, precise. I was pressed to, his mother, was inadvertently harming his health, while she, Sophia, was his vigilant savior. I looked at Carlos, expecting him to defend the dish he had loved all his life, to offer a reassuring word. But he merely nodded absently, his gaze focused on his plate. "Sophia is right, Mom. Perhaps I should eat less of it." The sensation of being betrayed by a stew, by a simple family meal, was absurd, yet the sting was as sharp as any verbal cut. The first truly significant incident, the one that shattered my lingering illusions, occurred on my birthday. To formally welcome Sophia into our family, I decided to give her a profoundly meaningful gift. It was a pair of pearl earrings, passed down from my own mother, a cherished family heirloom. They were my most precious jewels, holding generations of memories within their lustrous surfaces. When I handed her the small velvet box, her eyes, wide and luminous, lit up with what seemed like genuine awe. "Isabel, they are exquisite. I cannot possibly accept something so valuable," she protested, her hand fluttering to her chest. "I want you to have them," I insisted, my voice thick with emotion. "You are part of this family now, my dear." She put them on immediately, the pearls gleaming softly against her skin. That night, she was the absolute center of attention, radiant and graceful. The following morning, she came rushing down the stairs, her face streaked with tears, her voice a raw sob. "Isabel, Carlos, something terrible has happened," she wailed, her hands trembling. "One of the earrings? It is gone. I am certain I left them on the dresser last night, but now there is only one." My heart immediately constricted with a familiar dread. We searched everywhere, under furniture, in drawers, through her belongings, but to no avail. As I tried to console her, offering quiet words of comfort, Sophia turned to Carlos, her voice trembling with manufactured distress. "I am so sorry, my love. I know how much they meant to your mother. She must think I am so irresponsible, so careless. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps it was too soon to trust me with something so valuable." Her words, delivered with such a performative anguish, were a poisoned dart, aimed directly at my heart. Before I could utter a single syllable in my own defense, Carlos wrapped his arms tightly around her, his expression hardening as he turned to me. "Mom, it is just an earring. Do not make her feel worse. She is already upset enough." I stood there, frozen, utterly paralyzed. He did not say, "We will find it." He said, "Do not make her feel worse." In that precise moment, I was no longer the mother who had lost a treasured family relic. I had been transformed, in his eyes, into the cruel accuser. And she, nestled safely in my son's comforting embrace, was the innocent, heartbroken victim. That night, I sat alone in the dim quiet of the living room, the darkness pressing in around me. The lost earring, I realized with a chilling clarity, had not been an accident. It had been a calculated move, a deliberate play. And I had just woken up to the terrifying realization that, in the intricate, twisted game Sophia was playing, I was not only losing, I did not even know the rules. After the incident of the pearl earring, a heavy, suffocating atmosphere settled over the house. On the surface, Sophia maintained her sweet demeanor, her smiles still readily offered, but I could feel her silent victory hanging in the air, a palpable weight. She had tested Carlos's loyalty, and he had, without hesitation, chosen her. This was her new weapon, sharpened and honed, and she began to wield it with ruthless precision. My isolation was a gradual process, executed with such insidious skill that, at first, I barely registered it. My phone calls to Carlos, once answered with his familiar, warm greeting, increasingly began to be intercepted by Sophia. "Oh, suegrita, how lovely to hear from you," she would chirrup, her tone overly cheerful. "Carlos. He is in the shower right now. Would you like me to take a message for him?" Or, "He is driving. I am just holding the phone for him." Her excuses were always perfectly plausible, woven seamlessly into the fabric of daily life, yet each one served to erect another brick in the growing wall between my son and me. The text messages I sent once met with his thoughtful, familiar responses, and began to return with phrases that did not sound like him at all. They were shorter, colder, devoid of his usual warmth. I knew it was her, a creeping certainty solidifying in my gut. She had appointed herself the sole guardian of my son's life, carefully curating which information reached him and which was deliberately kept out. But her most potent weapon, the one she used with chilling effectiveness, was her masterful portrayal of the victim. She transformed herself into a creature of exquisite fragility, a perpetually beleaguered soul constantly threatened by her tyrannical, unfeeling mother-in-law. Me. One afternoon, as I returned from a quiet moment in the garden, I heard her voice from the living room, broken by what sounded like deep, heart-wrenching sobs. "No, my love." Of course, she did not say anything truly bad. She whispered between feigned tears to Carlos. "It is not what she says. It is how she looks at me. Like I am not good enough for you. Like I am an intruder in her home. I try so hard. Carlos, I truly do. But I feel like I will never earn her approval, never truly belong here." I froze behind the doorway, my blood turning to ice in my veins. I heard Carlos's voice, deep and soothing, a comforting balm to her manufactured distress. "Shh, my life. Do not say that. My mother loves you. It is just that. She is from a different generation. She does not mean it in a bad way. But it hurts, Sophia responded, her voice a masterful symphony of suffering. I feel like she is trying to push me away, to have you all to herself. I do not want to be the reason you two argue. I truly do not. It was a masterstroke of manipulation. She positioned herself as the peacemaker, the innocent party caught in the crossfire, all while she was the one diligently igniting the war. That Christmas, the invisible net she had been weaving around me tightened perceptibly. Our cherished family tradition had always been a grand Christmas Eve dinner, held in our home. My home. It was my night, my sacred space for generations. As I began to make my usual meticulous plans, Sophia intervened, her face radiant with the sweetest of smiles. Suegrita, you have worked so incredibly hard all these years, she said, placing a delicate hand on my shoulder, her touch light, yet possessive. Why do you not let Carlos and I handle everything this year? We could go to a lovely, elegant restaurant. You could just relax and enjoy yourself for once, without all the fuss. The offer sounded thoughtful, considerate, a generous gesture of relief, but I recognized its true, insidious intention. It was a move to strip me of my role as matriarch, to usurp my rightful place at the head of our holiday table, to erase my traditions. No, I replied, perhaps with more abruptness than I intended, my voice sharper than I wished. Christmas Eve is always here, at home. It is our tradition, Carlos's and mine. Sophia recoiled, her eyes widening in a feigned shock, as if I had physically slapped her. She withdrew silently from the room, her shoulders slumped in a performance of wounded innocence. Hours later, Carlos came to me, his face etched with a deep, weary disappointment. Mom, please. Sophia is only trying to help you, to give you a break. Why do you have to be so difficult about everything? Can you not see the effort she is making? The kindness she is offering? It is not about being difficult, Carlos. It is about our family, about our memories in this house, about what we have always shared. I retorted, my own voice rising in frustration, a raw ache in my throat. You are not listening to me, he shouted, his voice echoing in the quiet hallway, his own frustration finally erupting. It is as if you are determined not to like anything she does. I stared at my son, at the man I had raised, nurtured, and loved with every fiber of my being. And for the first time, I did not recognize him. Through his eyes, I was no longer his loving mother. I was the monster Sophia had so carefully painted, a selfish, controlling, unpleasant obstacle to his happiness. I stopped arguing, the futility of it weighing me down. I just whispered, "Fine, Carlos. Whatever you want." That night, sitting alone in the silence of my room, I finally understood. This war was not merely about winning Carlos's affection. It was a relentless campaign to erase me entirely from his life, to render me invisible. Sophia did not want to share him. She wanted him whole, completely and utterly for herself. And the insidious web she had meticulously woven, with its delicate, yet unbreakable, threads of lies and manipulation, was slowly, inexorably, closing around me. The period that followed that chilling Christmas was a cold, silent truce, a tense stalemate. Sophia had won a significant battle, and she seemed content to savor her newfound power, her quiet dominion. But I, living under her calculated gaze, knew this fragile peace was merely a temporary reprieve, a lull before the next inevitable assault. A few months later, Carlos and Sophia sat me down in the living room, their faces composed. Carlos's expression was a blend of nervousness and an almost childlike excitement. Sophia's, however, held a distinct air of pure, unadulterated self-satisfaction. "Mom," Carlos began, reaching for Sophia's hand, his fingers intertwining with hers in a display of unified intent. "We are going to get married, and we have made a decision. We believe it is best if we live here, with you. That way, we can take care of you, And at the same time, we can save for our future, for our own home. As he spoke, Sophia offered me a smile, a practiced curve of her lips that was meant to convey affection. But to me, it was the smirk of a conqueror, of someone who had claimed territory. It was not a question, not an invitation for discussion. It was a proclamation, a fait accompli. My house, my sanctuary, my refuge, had officially become their nest, their stronghold. What followed was not an abrupt, violent takeover, but a silent, methodical invasion. Sophia, armed with the insidious excuse of modernizing the space and making it more suitable for us, began to systematically dismantle my life, memory by cherished memory. The old, comfortable armchairs where Ricardo and I used to read, the fabric worn smooth by years of loving use, were unceremoniously hauled away, replaced by a sleek, designer sofa, cold and impersonal, an alien presence in my familiar living room. The heavy, floral curtains that Ricardo had chosen with such care, lovingly hanging them himself, were torn down, making way for stark, minimalist blinds that filtered out the warmth of the sun. Every single change was a fresh blow, a calculated erasure, but I held my tongue, paralyzed by the veiled threat in my son's eyes, the unspoken warning that if I protested, I would be defying him. I moved through my own home like a ghost, a silent, unseen presence, careful not to disturb the new order. The breaking point, the moment the illusion shattered completely, arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. I walked into the living room and found Sophia standing purposefully in front of the fireplace, a place of honor for our family. In her hands, she held my wedding portrait, a sepia-toned image of Ricardo and me on our happiest day, alongside several other cherished photographs of my deceased husband. I was thinking, she began, her voice dripping with a poisonous sweetness, that we could reorganize this area a little. These photos are lovely, of course, but perhaps they would be better displayed in the hallway, or in your bedroom. This is the main living space of the house now, our space. And here, we could place a beautiful post, large photo of our wedding. It is about our future. Do you understand? The air suddenly escaped my lungs, leaving me breathless. A cold dread seeped into my bones. She was not just reorganizing. She was attempting to erase Ricardo, to wipe away his memory, to obliterate my history, my very foundation. No, I said, my voice trembling, despite my desperate effort to keep it steady. But it was firm, unwavering. Those photos stay exactly where they are. This house also has a past. Sophia, a past that you seem determined to wipe clean. Sophia's mask of sweetness shattered in an instant. Her eyes, filled with a sudden, performative welling of crocodile tears, darted towards the doorway, perfectly timed, just as Carlos walked in. Carlos, do you see? I told you, she cried, her voice laden with a false, exaggerated pain. No matter what I do, no matter how hard I try, to your mother, I will always be an outsider, an intruder. I just wanted this to feel like our home, but it is her house, and it always will be. I have no place here. Carlos did not even spare me a glance. He rushed to Sophia's side, gathering her into his arms, his face twisting into a furious glare that he had never friend, not once in his life, directed at me. Enough, Mom. I have had more than enough of this, he shouted, his voice resonating through the walls, an alien sound in my own home. Sophia is my future wife. She will live here, and this will be her house just as much as it is yours. I demand that you treat her with respect. He paused, his chest heaving with barely contained rage, his eyes burning into mine. Either you respect her, or it is clear that we cannot all live together under one roof. The choice, Mom, is yours. There it was. The final, crushing threat. My right to exist in my own home, the house I had built with Ricardo, the place where I had raised my son, now depended entirely on my absolute submission to her. In that agonizing moment, I understood with a clarity that pierced my heart. I was no longer fighting for my place in my son's affections. I was fighting for my very existence, for the right to breathe in my own space. Sophia was no longer the charming fiancée. She was the undisputed mistress of the house. And Carlos, my own flesh and blood, was her willing executioner. Life after that chilling ultimatum morphed into a silent, suffocating nightmare. I walked on tiptoes in my own home, consciously trying to become invisible, to fade into the background. Sophia, on the other hand, reveled in her power, her cruel confidence growing with each passing day. She no longer bothered to conceal her contempt for me. Her barbed comments, her subtle put-downs, fell casually from her lips. Knowing that Carlos would no longer defend me, no longer question her, I became a servant in my own house, a shadow ignored, my presence tolerated only because it served her larger purpose. I knew, with a sinking certainty, that it was only a matter of time before she delivered the final, crushing blow. And she did. It was a Thursday afternoon, a day when the sky wept with a relentless, driving rain. Carlos was due home from work any moment. I was in the kitchen, meticulously cleaning, my back to the staircase. I heard Sophia descending the stairs, her footsteps light, deliberate. "Still here, then," she said with an almost theatrical disdain, stopping midway down the flight. "I thought you would have hidden in your room by now, like always." I did not respond. There was no point, no victory to be gained in engaging her. A tense, heavy silence descended, thick with her unspoken malice. Suddenly, just as I heard the familiar sound of Carlos's car pulling into the driveway, Sophia let out a sharp, piercing scream, a sound that tore through the quiet of the house. It was immediately followed by the sickening, dull thud of a body violently hitting the polished wooden steps. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat, and rushed into the foyer. I found her huddled at the foot of the stairs, a crumpled heap, sobbing hysterically. A vivid, bleeding scratch snaked down her arm, a cruel red line against her pale skin. In that exact instant, the front door burst open, and Carlos stormed in, his eyes wide with alarm. His gaze swept from Sophia, crying pitifully on the floor, to me, standing frozen, paralyzed by shock and disbelief. Before I could articulate a single word, before my mind could even fully process the monstrous scene unfolding before me, Sophia slowly, dramatically, raised a trembling finger and pointed it directly at me. It was her, Carlos. It was her, she shrieked, her voice raw, fractured by what sounded like genuine agony. We were arguing about the wedding, just a little disagreement. I told her I only wanted her to be happy for us. And she just went crazy. She called me a thief. And then, she pushed me. I swear to you, my love, she pushed me down the stairs. The world, my world, seemed to stop. The accusation was so monstrous, so utterly depraved, that my mind simply could not process it, could not reconcile it with my reality. "No," I whispered, my voice barely a thread, a fragile sound against the storm of her lies. "Carlos, my son, I did nothing. She fell by herself. She tripped. But my weak, stuttering denial was no match for her Oscar-worthy performance, for the torrent of her calculated tears. Carlos did not even spare me a second glance. He immediately knelt beside Sophia, gathering her into his arms, cradling her head against his chest with an absolute, unwavering devotion. He looked at her, his face a mask of profound concern. Then, slowly, he lifted his gaze to mine. The love, the warmth, the deep-seated affection, everything that had ever existed in his eyes for me had vanished. Only a glacial contempt remained, cold and definitive, He rose slowly, carefully helping Sophia to her feet. She leaned heavily against him, limping visibly, and cast a quick, triumphant glance over his shoulder at me. It was a look of pure, unadulterated, ruthless victory. Carlos spoke, and his voice was that of a stranger, a judge delivering an irrevocable sentence. I have seen enough. For months, I have tried to justify your behavior, your coldness, your jealousy, your constant disapproval. But this, Mom, this is unforgivable. You have put my wife, my future, in danger. You have crossed a line that has no return, no forgiveness. He looked directly into my eyes, his gaze piercing me, searing into my soul. You cannot stay here. You are a danger to her, to us, to our future. He paused, allowing the immense weight of his words to crush me, to extinguish any last flicker of hope. Gather your things, only the most important ones. You will leave tonight. There was no trial, no questions, no moment for defense. My son, the flesh of my flesh, had condemned me without a second of doubt, without a hint of hesitation. In a daze, a trance of disbelief, I ascended the stairs. I mechanically packed a small, worn suitcase with a few clothes, the precious photos of Ricardo, and the last shred of dignity that remained to me. When I descended, he stood by the open front door, his face utterly impassive, a blank canvas of detachment. Sophia stood just behind him, observing the final scene from the archway of the living room, her tears now gone, replaced by a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. Goodbye, Mom, Carlos said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, his eyes fixed on some distant point beyond me, refusing to meet my gaze. I stepped out into the cold, rainy night. The soft click of the door closing behind me was the most definitive sound I have ever heard in my life. It was the sound of my world ending, of my heart shattering into a million irreparable pieces forever. They had stolen my son. They had expelled me from my home. The betrayal, finally, was complete, consummated in the chill of that desolate evening. The rain of that night mingled with my own silent tears as I walked aimlessly through the dark, unfamiliar streets. My feet carried me, not knowing where to go, until I found myself in the anonymous, sterile confines of a cheap motel room on the edge of town. I sat on the thin, uncomfortable mattress, my small suitcase at my feet, the meager contents of my life now contained within its worn fabric. The silence in that room was deafening, a vast, echoing void. In that oppressive silence, I replayed the scene over and over in my mind, an endless loop of pain. Sophia's chilling scream, the fabricated accusation in her trembling finger, and above all, the vacant, icy gaze of my son. It was not a burning anger that consumed me, not yet. It was a profound, bottomless emptiness that threatened to swallow me whole. The days that followed blurred into a thick, suffocating fog of grief and disbelief. Clutching onto a desperate, dwindling hope, I tried to reach Carlos. My first call went straight to voicemail. I left him a message, my voice thick with sobs, cracking with raw emotion. Carlos, son, please. It is Mom. You have to listen to me. I swear on your father's memory that I did nothing. Please, call me back. I need you. I miss you so much. I left 10 messages like that, each one a plea, a cry from the depths of my breaking heart. None were ever returned. On the third day, when I finally mustered the courage to dial his number again, it no longer rang. It went directly to a busy signal, then to an automated message. He had blocked me. The digital rejection was like a second door slammed in my face, colder and more calculated than the first. It was then I understood the depth of his conviction in Sophia's lies, the completeness of my erasure from his life. A week later, still adrift in a sea of despair, I took a city bus that deposited me near my old neighborhood. I did not dare approach the house. My sanctuary turned prison. Instead, I stayed hidden in the shadows of a large oak tree on a nearby corner, watching, like a thief in my own life. I waited for hours, enduring the chill of the evening, until, finally, I saw them. They emerged from the house, laughing, their figures silhouetted against the warm glow of the interior lights. Sophia clung to Carlos's arm, her head thrown back in a fit of genuine, unrestrained laughter as he whispered something in her ear. They looked happy, radiant, their faces unburdened, as if a great, oppressive shadow had finally lifted from their lives. And in that moment, a chilling certainty pierced through me. I was that shadow. The impact of that image, of their unadulterated joy, was almost as devastating as my expulsion. It was the final, undeniable proof of my utter insignificance to them. I surrendered. I rented a tiny, sparsely furnished room in a run-down apartment building on the opposite side of the city, a place where no one knew my name. I began to search for humble work, anything to survive, to keep the wolf from the door. My days became a monotonous procession of gray, empty hours. A profound loneliness, my only constant companion. The universe, however, sometimes has strange, circuitous ways of revealing the truth, of delivering unexpected, brutal clarity. One afternoon, while pushing my meager cart through the produce aisle of a local market, a familiar hand touched my arm. It was Marta, an old neighbor, a kind woman who had moved away years ago, a face from a happier past. "Isabel, my goodness, it is so wonderful to see you," she exclaimed, her smile warm, genuine. But her expression quickly faded as she took in my gaunt face, the weariness in my eyes. "Are you all right, dear? You look so thin, so tired." "I have had better times, Marta," I replied vaguely, offering a weak, strained smile. "I heard Carlos got married. Congratulations." "Though, to be honest," Marta said, leaning closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "when my cousin from the city told me who he married, I was shocked. Her name is Sofia Rivas. Is it not?" I nodded, a sudden, frantic pounding beginning in my chest. "You know her?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Know her? No," Marta responded, her eyes filling with a genuine, heartfelt pity. "But her reputation, that is certainly well known in certain circles. My cousin, she is a lawyer, and she handled the divorce of Sofia's last target, an older, wealthy widower, much like your Ricardo, if you do not mind me saying. Sofia left him practically ruined. They say it is her specialty, her modus operandi. She finds vulnerable men with money or property, isolates them from their families, and then drains them of everything they have. She is a professional, Isabel, a true predator." Every word Marta uttered was a nail driven into the coffin of my round, lingering pain, each one confirming a terrible, chilling suspicion. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The overly specific questions about Ricardo's insurance, the relentless need to isolate Carlos from me, to sever our sacred bond, the calculated cruelty, the carefully staged victimhood, the methodical dismantling of my home and my life. It had not been a simple rivalry, a familial misunderstanding. It had been a planned, methodical attack. My son had not just been deceived, he had been hunted, stalked, preyed upon. That night, in the crushing solitude of my small, anonymous room, I cried for the last time for the naive, loving mother I had been, the one who had invited the wolf into her home. The sadness did not vanish, not entirely, but it underwent a profound transformation. Beneath the raw pain, a new sensation began to stir, to burn with a cold, clear light. A searing, lucid anger. My sorrow was no longer that of an abandoned mother, but that of a woman who finally, unequivocally, understood the monster she had faced. The loneliness remained, a constant companion. But now it was, accompanied by the terrible, undeniable clarity of the truth. The truth Marta revealed to me was a bitter medicine, potent and hard to swallow. On one hand, it liberated me from the crushing weight of self-blame, from the insidious thought that I was crazy, or a bad mother who had somehow driven her son away. No, I was not. I had simply been an inconvenient obstacle in the carefully orchestrated plan of a remorseless predator. On the other hand, it solidified the profoundly painful reality that my son, my beloved Carlos, had been an incredibly easy target, blinded by a manipulative charm and a desire for a life Sophia had expertly painted for him. I had reached the absolute bottom of my despair, the point where there was nowhere else to fall. It was then, in that bleak moment, that my eyes fell upon the only photo I had managed to save, a small, worn photograph of my husband Ricardo and me, taken years ago in the vibrant garden we had so lovingly cultivated together. He was smiling at me, his eyes full of that familiar strength, that unconditional love that had always been my anchor. I remembered his words, spoken to me so many years ago, words that had once felt like a loving exaggeration. "Isabel, you are the strongest woman I know." In that precise instant, something deep within me, something long dormant, clicked into place, a powerful, resonant awakening. I could not allow the calculated malice of a stranger and the tragic blindness of my son to define the rest of my life. Ricardo would not have wanted that for me. I did not deserve that fate. I made a solemn decision, a silent vow to myself. If my old world had been systematically destroyed, brick by brick, then I would build a new one, just as meticulously, just as resiliently. The process was slow, arduous, each step a small act of defiance against the shadow that still lingered. My humble job in a small CAPES community library became my sanctuary, my quiet haven. The silence there was peaceful, not oppressive, a balm to my fractured spirit. I carefully resumed contact with Marta, and her unwavering friendship became a much-needed balm, a comforting hand in my isolation. I joined a community gardening club, a group of quiet and determined women who found solace in the earth, sinking my hands into the rich, dark soil, feeling its texture, watching something new and beautiful grow purely through my own efforts, began a slow and gentle healing process for wounds I had believed incurable. I started to find genuine joy in the smallest, most unassuming things. The comforting taste of hot coffee on a crisp morning, a brief, genuine conversation with a neighbor, the warmth of the afternoon sun on my face as I tended my small patch of flowers. I was painstakingly building a new life, smaller, quieter, perhaps, but infinitely more real, more authentic than the one I had so tragically lost. A little over a year had passed since that rainy night of my exile. One late afternoon, as I returned to my modest apartment after a day at the library, I found a man waiting silently beside my door. He was noticeably thinner, his eyes sunken with deep, dark circles, and an unkempt beard shadowed his face. For a fleeting moment, I did not recognize him, could not place the broken figure before me. Then, a chilling wave of recognition washed over me. It was Carlos. He stood there, staring at me, his eyes filled with a profound, palpable shame, a self-loathing so deep that he could barely hold my gaze. He looked like a shipwreck survivor who had finally, against all odds, washed ashore, utterly broken. "Mom." His voice was a raw, husky whisper, brittle and broken, a shadow of the strong voice I remembered. I did not say anything. I simply waited, my heart a quiet, steady drum in my chest. "You were right," he continued, the tears beginning to streak down his grimy face, carving clean paths through the dust and fatigue. You were right about everything. Sophia, she is gone. She took everything from me. We sold the house to invest in a business venture that turned out to be nothing but a sophisticated scam. The money, all of it, vanished. And then, she vanished too. She left me with absolutely nothing. Mom. He looked down at his empty, trembling hands, as if he still could not fully comprehend the magnitude of his loss, the depth of his folly. But it is not the house or the money that truly matters. Not anymore. It is what I did to you. I threw you out of your own home, Mom. I believed her wicked lies. I abandoned you when you needed me most. Every single day since she left, your face, your heartbroken face, is the only thing I see. Can you ever forgive me, Mom? Can you find it in your heart to forgive me someday? I looked at him, at the man who was undeniably my son, yet at the same time, a tragic stranger. And I did not feel the surge of anger I might have expected. Nor did I feel an embodied, overwhelming wave of maternal love that would compel me to rush forward and embrace him, to console him as I once would have. Instead, I felt a deep, profound, and utterly heartbreaking pity. I saw the wreckage he had caused, the self-inflicted disaster of his choices, and I knew, with an unshakable certainty, that my own arduous journey, my hard-won healing, had given me a quiet strength, a resilient peace that he now utterly lacked. I took a deep, steady breath, the cool, clean air filling my lungs with the hard-earned calm that had taken me so long to cultivate. Forgiveness, Carlos, is a very long road, and the forgiveness I might someday offer you, that is not the most important one you need right now. The forgiveness you truly need to find, my son, is your own. I told him, my voice tranquil, devoid of accusation, yet firm and unwavering. You lost your house only a few months ago. I lost mine, the home your father and I built, long before that. Piece by agonizing piece. I have learned to build a new home, a new life, right here. I gestured towards the door of my modest apartment, a place that now felt like a fortress of peace. It is small, yes, but it is mine, and it is filled with a quiet peace I never thought I would find again. I took a deliberate step towards my door, not inviting him to cross the threshold, not offering him shelter. If you want to begin to build yours, Carlos, you will have to do it from the very foundations, just as I did. And you will have to do it alone. I opened the door to my apartment and, before stepping inside, I looked at him one last time. I saw a lost child trapped in the body of a broken man, facing for the very first time the real, unvarnished consequences of his own choices. I closed the door, not with a defiant slam, but with an absolute, resolute finality. Inside my home, my new sanctuary, I leaned against the sturdy wood, closing my eyes. There was no cruel joy in his ruin, only a sad, quiet confirmation of the truth. But for the first time, in what felt like an eternity, I felt truly, utterly free. My story, my narrative, was no longer defined by his betrayal. It was, finally, about my own enduring survival.